He's a Grateful Dead fanatic who spread propaganda for anti-communist rebels in Central and South America. He brought MTV's Rock the Vote concept to Russia and hung out with mobsters there. He learned hardball tactics from GOP strategist Roger Stone, fought to bring Twin Peaks back, lost small fortunes, and fled with a parrot to a tugboat off the Florida coast after getting death threats. But there's one thing conservative radio talk show host Michael R. Caputo insists he has never been: a rogue CIA agent. And now he's part of the team working to land Donald Trump the Republican nomination for president in New York State. Perhaps best known as the campaign manager for Carl Palladino's 2010 run for governor, Mr. Caputo now regularly fills in as a political talk show host on WBEN radio. And he is now working with Palladino as part of the New York political team trying to organize support to help Trump win the state's Republican nomination. He makes a pittance of what he used to. Mr. Caputo owes the federal government a huge sum in back taxes, and he irritates local Democrats who label him a paid attack dog. But Mr. Caputo professes not to care. For once, he's happy. "I'm home, finally," he said. An admitted small-time thief and juvenile delinquent growing up in the South Towns, Caputo said his first encounter with Palladino occurred when he accompanied his father to work in the Elliott Square building and tried stealing change from the blind man running the first-floor convenience store. Palladino caught him, repeatedly kicked him in the legs, and threw him out. After Mr. Caputo graduated from high school, his father dropped him off at the Army enlistment station in downtown Buffalo. "If you come back from the service the same way you're going in," Raymond Caputo recalled telling his son, "you're not welcome in my house." The change in him started fast. The day Mr. Caputo realized that President Ronald Reagan was responsible for his 10% Army raise, he became a Republican. Mr. Caputo threw his restless energy to the political right and never looked back. After leaving the Army in 1983, he enrolled in college. That's when his name first appeared in the Buffalo News. Stories appeared about his political pot-stirring efforts at the University of Buffalo, including conservative students' plans to spy and report on radical, liberal professors believed to be closet Marxists. Mr. Caputo signed on as a writer for Congressman Jack Kemp in his White House bid. After that campaign failed, he moved on to Central and South America, where he rubbed elbows with Iran-Contra figure Oliver North, doing his part to spread Reagan's anti-communist doctrine through public relations and propaganda. Mr. Caputo was one of half a dozen light-skinned gringos who connected politicians, journalists, and other public opinion influencers with rebels and other political allies in Latin America. According to J. Michael Waller, who oversaw Caputo's work for the now-defunct Council for Inter-American Security, "We believed in the cause," Waller said, "and we were willing to work for next to nothing." Mr. Caputo later employed his media skills with the House of Representatives and the failed George Bush Dan Quayle re-election campaign. When tumultuous change shook the former Soviet Union in the 1990s, with Russian leaders struggling to build a more democratic and free market society after more than 50 years of communist rule, Caputo staked out his next adventure. He moved there in 1994 as a staff member with the U.S. Agency for International Development, describing Moscow as Paris in the 1920s with automatic weapons. Michael Caputo was one of hundreds of Westerners who flocked to the new Russia to advise people there on how democracy works, said David Hoffman, former Moscow bureau chief for The Washington Post. "It really was a pioneering time, and not for the faint of heart," said Hoffman, who traded gossip with Caputo back then. Mr. Caputo took up residence in an upscale artist neighborhood and lived next to a cafe that he said was owned by the local mafia. It was the kind of place where one could hear soaring opera music in the morning and find a body dumped at night. Though friendly with senior Kremlin officials, he butted heads with his superiors in the U.S. State Department. The Washington Post reported in 1995 that Mr. Caputo, an obscure advisor to the Russian Election Commission, got his phone, fax, and office keys confiscated for refusing to support a State Department position to the media. Michael Caputo thought about returning stateside, but he stayed, heartbroken over the death of Grateful Dead leader Jerry Garcia, but in love with a Russian astrophysics student, whom he later married. He also opened a public relations firm to help Western companies get a foothold in the newly opened country. "It was the ideal time for someone like Michael to open shop," said Michael Conforti, who hired Caputo to get G-Tech's online lottery system established in Russia. "It was also a dangerous time. Business people regularly faced threats and more. Roughly 40 were killed in just 1 year, but fewer foreigners," Hoffman said. Mr. Caputo recalled one night of heavy drinking with someone he was vetting as a potential local partner for G-Tech and unknowingly insulting the mob-connected man. The man's bodyguards dragged Mr. Caputo out the restaurant's kitchen door, threw him into a car, and took him for a ride before they left him unattended and he got away, he said. Mr. Caputo proved adept at navigating the Byzantine Russian bureaucracy, Conforti said, but in the end it didn't matter. The ruble crashed in the late 1990s. Businesses pulled out, leaving companies like Mr. Caputo's in ruins. So, in 2000, Mr. Caputo finally returned to the United States. He co-founded Rainmaker, a PR firm for budding telecom and internet companies based in Washington, D.C., but also worked for Russians on this side of the Atlantic. Mr. Caputo helped President Vladimir Putin weather U.S. government criticism for taking over an independent TV station. When Rainmaker failed following the dot-com bust, Mr. Caputo took his communications expertise to Allegiance Telecom, a Dallas company fighting to stay in business. That company went bankrupt 2 years later, and with it went his retirement money wrapped up in Allegiance stock. Low money and his marriage on the rocks, Caputo seemed to run out of steam. Mr. Caputo left Dallas and was loafing on his dad's couch in Orchard Park when he got a call from his mentor and close friend, Roger Stone. The bare-knuckled conservative strategist told Mr. Caputo to join him in Miami Beach. From there, Caputo launched Michael Caputo Public Relations, the firm he runs today. When Forbes magazine correspondent Paul Klebnikov was shot to death in Moscow in 2004, Caputo penned a Washington Post column decrying the brutal billionaires of Russia, and one in particular, Boris Berezovsky. Soon after, Caputo said he started getting death threats, so he bought a tugboat and armed himself with a .40 caliber Glock. Off the Florida coast for much of the next 5 years, he let his hair grow, rarely wore shoes, and ran his PR office from his boat with a laptop and a phone. Mr. Caputo kept a white parrot as company. Caputo left his tugboat for a spell in 2007 when he agreed to consult on a parliamentary campaign in the Ukraine. That's where he met his second wife. She insisted he give up politics, and Mr. Caputo agreed to finally set down roots. The couple moved to East Aurora in 2009, and Caputo made plans to join his father's insurance company. Mr. Caputo immediately broke his promise and signed on to manage Palladino's Republican campaign for governor in 2010. Although the run was unsuccessful, Mr. Caputo earned praise from Mr. Palladino. He's a good reactor to chaos. Caputo's office sits above a shoe repair shop in East Aurora. Behind his desk, a statuette of Ronald Reagan stands alongside Jerry Garcia's guitar-wielding figure. Three employees work for him down the hall, 3 more in Miami Beach, and 3 in Moscow. Mr. Caputo says he's not on anyone's local campaign payroll and does work for the Republican Party free of charge. Though Mr. Caputo says he is a proud American, he owes the U.S. government more than $100,000 in back taxes and penalties and has multiple liens against him. It is a classic tale of reinvention, American style.